Animism, according to Wikipedia, is the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinctive spiritual essence. I first learned the word and its meaning from the history class back in the days as some of the philosophical elements of the origin myth of Korea. Of course, it is no way particular to Korea, but most other ancient cultures and religions share the varying degree of animism. It's just in the cultures with monotheism, such as Christianity, that animism became gradually degraded to a superstition. As mankind are the only creature that are created after the image of God, and the only creature with a knowledge of good and evil, the souls of other animals and creatures, if they had a soul to start with, were not a matter of serious concern in the Christian world. As the modern world is largely built on the Western model in its economic and political structures, it has also inevitably adopted the human-centric philosophy. World over, there has been human-centric push against the local animisms throughout the history of modernization. The most cliché of such would be found in American films and TV dramas, where a mysterious Native American wise man warns against the consequence of hurting the soul of the land and nature, which would be usually laughed at by a profit-driven white businessman and developers. Similar clashes happened in Korea too throughout its contemporary history of rapid industrialization. Trees were cut, rivers straightened, giant rock blown up, wild animals driven out. In the end, or at least for the time being, we know which side has won, seeing the economic prosperity of the country today. But old beliefs are hard to die. There are still plenty of cautionary tales floating around in which the resentful souls of the nature taking revenge on the insolent humans. Today we are taking a look at 4 of such stories from Korea. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by your host, Anthony. An acquaintance used to be a construction laborer. Apparently it suited his wanderer's soul well. One time it led him to the construction of a tunnel in the mountainous part of a Gangwon province. Gangwon province is famous for its particularly tough mountainous terrain, as peak of the backbone of the peninsula run through it. By the time he arrived, the construction hadn't even started its groundwork. The reason for the delay was the protest from the local people. The designated spot was a holy spot where dragons are born, according to them. Should it really commence, they should at least throw a big ritual to appease the python residing in the spot, waiting for the day it metamorphosizes into a dragon to move its head away from the construction site. Failing that would result in disasters. But of course, his boss and the construction company could not give a toss about such a superstition of the country people. It was the time when the country ran in the notion of the boss orders and it's done, dead or alive. With an enormous pressure from the upper line, they won over the leader of the village with a bribery, and the construction finally started. On the first day, my acquaintance had a dream in which a holy-looking old man dressed in a blue cloak appeared and sternly reproached that should the construction commence, there would be consequences. He found out other workers also had similar dreams too the next morning. He was reluctant to stay on the project, but its relatively high payment was hard to drop. Only later he learned the foreman of the construction also had a dream of the old man in blue cloak. In his dream, the old man pleaded to give him a few days to shift away from the construction site. But the foreman had no power of such decision and had to proceed as was planned. as they started carving out a hole into the rock of the mountain. Every night a worker would go delirious and drop dead one by one. Constant little and big accidents such as rock falling down or an electrocution were not even the news anymore. My acquaintance could not just wait for his turn anymore and left the site. After he left, they found on the site a giant blue rat snake, dead. The construction company went subsequently bankrupt, and most of the managerial line on the site experienced various misfortunes on their turn. The poor foreman suffered a terrible headache, so bad that made him jump around, before finally perished. The local villagers would say that was the curse of the dead python, whose dream of becoming a dragon was interrupted. It started when I was 5. At the time, my mom used to visit a local temple to pray at the crack of dawn. I often got up early myself and went out to the alleyway to our home to wait for her return. Mom had scolded me that a young boy should not be out at such an hour of the day, but young me didn't care. One such morning, in the blue of the dawn, I was crouching down under the street lamp waiting for Mom as usual. Somebody approached and asked, "Are you waiting for somebody?" I looked up to find it was a young woman. "For my mom," I said. "Aren't you bored alone?" "No, I'm okay." "Won't you accompany to the door over there? Then I will wait with you till your mom comes," said the woman. "Okay." The moment she held my hand, I felt something was wrong. Her hand was so cold and the grip was much too strong for a woman. "I don't want to go. I want to wait by myself," I said quickly, but she ignored me and just marched on, dragging me along. I started crying and shouting, "Let me go, I don't wanna," and so on, but she didn't even give a look at me. I managed to grab on a bike chained to a fence. Only then I noticed the woman's feet was fuzzy, as if shrouded in a fog, and they definitely looked that of an animal. I could not resist her inhuman strength. As I let go of my grip, I heard her saying, "Good boy, just to that door." I looked where she was heading and saw the door where there had never been a door. I was now totally frightened and cried and kicked my might. Then I heard a faint voice of Mom calling me. In an instant, the young woman disappeared, and Mom picked me up from the ground in crying mess. "What's happening? Why were you walking towards the river bank? I told you it's dangerous there by yourself," Mom said. She wiped my tears and took me back home. She seemed to think I had just dozed off on the street and had a nightmare. But that wasn't the end. I had a dream in which a limping old lady came up to me and asked to help her over towards the door. I agreed. But the moment I held her hand, the memory came back all at once. That inhuman strength, the grip, and strangely furry for a lady. I screamed, "No, I don't want to go, let me go." As the old woman picked me up and marched to the door, I woke up all in tears. And that was the beginning. The nightmare returned night after night, and I got weaker for the ailment no doctors could diagnose. When I turned 7, I had an even stranger dream. I saw a woman throwing up all over my room. Vomit was endlessly sputtering out of her mouth. I asked what was wrong and how I might help. She only growled, "My stomach hurts! It hurts!" She suddenly glared up at me and screeched, "It's all your fault! Die!" When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat. I told Mom about the dream. The next day, she got a talisman from somewhere, put that red piece of paper in a little pouch, and told me to carry it at all times, never to lose it. Time passed, and I became 14. I was taking a nap at home and got up to the doorbell ringing. When I opened my eyes, I found the house in total darkness. I fumbled for the light switch but could not find it. It felt like the space had warped and everything was crooked. All the while, the bell was kept going off, so I stepped outside to the door. "Who is this?" "I'm your mom's friend. Open the door, please." It was a friendly voice, but I wasn't convinced. "May I ask your name, please?" I said. Silence. "Hello?" "We went to the same school. It's okay. Open the door," the visitor said. I remembered what my mom often had told me, that a ghost cannot answer 3 times, so I asked one more time. "What do you want?" Silence. "Hello?" Silence. I decided to phone Mom and went back in. While still looking for the light switch, my eyes got used to the darkness, and I saw a woman in white crouching down on the dining table and throwing up. Who are you?" "My stomach hurts! It hurts!" Then suddenly raging up, "Why did you open the door? Why? I must take you with me!" I woke up with a scream. The nightmares returned. I had no idea why all this was happening to me. What was that woman, and why did she want to harm me so much? And then I had yet another dream. I saw the same woman hurrying somewhere with some food in her arms. She looked around, calling for somebody. 5 little kittens sprung out from somewhere to get fed, and the woman shed tears looking at them. I realized then what it was all about. When I was 5, I fed rat poison to a cat. I don't understand why I did it when I clearly saw the rat and skull mark on the box. The woman in my dream was the cat I had killed, who was still worrying about her starving kittens, even as she died in agony. She never returned in my dream after that. I had learned my lesson in a hard way, that every life is precious and that even an animal can return as a resentful ghost from an unfair death. My dad's childhood home shared a wall with our next-door neighbor. In the garden of the neighbors was a beautiful large jujube tree. It bore so plentiful fruits year by year, even my dad's family could enjoy it. But the daughter of the family would complain that it gave her creeps when the shadows of the tree branches drew over her paper doors. Her parents ignored her plea to cut the tree down for a long time, but in the end her lengthy teary complaint won them over, and the old tree was cut down. Not long after, their cow died. Both parents died of a mystery disease, followed by the girl's older brother hanging himself, and a younger brother dying by accidentally drinking herbicide. Now left all alone in the world, the daughter survived day to day with the help of other villagers and neighbors. One day a lady from the neighborhood brought some pancakes for her, but nobody answered the door despite repeated calling. Struck by a foreboding, she rushed in, as nobody locked doors at the time in such small villages. The house was eerily silent. Thinking she might be just out somewhere, the neighbor opened the door of her room. It was empty and clean, too clean and tidy, as if she cleaned it before a long journey away. The neighbor hurried to the village leader. None of the neighbors seemed to have seen the girl that day, and soon the search team was organized to look for the girl in and around the village, but no trace. Next day, somebody found a shoe near the local stream, and the search team walked along the stream, spreading across the width of the water. Suddenly, a guy in the middle of the line collapsed on the spot. Others asked him to be careful and what was wrong with him. And the guy said in a shaky voice, She's under me. I'm stepping on her." Even though she had been missing only for a day, her body was already damaged significantly, probably eaten by fish and other water creatures. The sudden demise of the entire family was said to be the curse of the jujube tree. I was born with a strong spiritual sensitivity. Seeing and sensing what others don't would have meant a complicated childhood, but thankfully the destiny had it for me to meet a mentor at the early age. She was a famous shaman living in the neighborhood, and I called her an auntie, though she was of no blood relation. I loved spending time at her place, where I could just be myself, and auntie also adored me like I were her own nephew. One day we were spending time working in her garden. She kept a little vegetable patch, and I was excited about the idea of picking some fresh crops to make a bibimbap later. But she suddenly stopped replying to me. She was looking at the gate with hard eyes. I instantly knew something was about to happen. A bit of brat full of curiosities was I then, and I could not help myself from asking her, "What is it, auntie? What's going to happen?" She didn't say anything, but quickly locked the gate, which was unusual as a gate was kept open during the day for anybody in need of help, and told me we should get inside. And just as I expected, somebody started knocking on the gate. Again I feigned innocence and asked, "Aren't you answering the gate?" But auntie just hushed me. The situation turned into a battle of who's more stubborn. A woman was pleading from outside to open the door, that her son was dying and auntie should help them out. And she didn't give up for what must have been a good 1 hour. In the end, auntie sighed deep and opened the gate with a clear reluctance written all over her face. I, of course, followed right behind her. At the gate were an old lady and a young man. The young man looked pretty battered all around with bruises and scratches. Facing them, Auntie's face frowned itself, and she muttered almost despite herself, "Dear, dear, this smell of blood." Auntie let them in past the gate, but made it clear they were not welcome by not letting them inside the house. Auntie looked at the guy with a deep disdain and despise. I couldn't see what was wrong with him at first. He looked like any old next-door Joe to me. Regardless, the old mother told us their story. Her son was suffering severe pain in his stomach, and no doctors seemed to know why. On top of that, he would fall into a series of accidents for no reason. Slipping and falling down on the street, fall down a staircase, and so on. The accumulation of these directed that something unusual was happening, and so she came to seek help from Auntie to save her only child. Auntie's reaction was cold. She said that karma was the rule of the world and a sinner should accept his due. The mother protested that her son was a good boy, he wouldn't have hurt anybody in his life. Auntie said that might be so, but he did hurt an innocent animal. She didn't take time anymore and asked the man directly, "Didn't you kill and eat a roe deer recently? A pregnant one at that?" His face turned black. Auntie explained the ghost of the deer was following him to revenge on her dead young, while the spirit of an unborn fetus eaten by him rumbled in his inside. Its mom was butting against his stomach. No wonder he was suffering the pain. "And what for have you drunk the deer's blood? You're still stinking of blood," Auntie said. The mother's face turned white and started beating him on the spot, shouting, "Were you mad? What were you thinking?" Auntie was just looking at them with mixture of pity and disdain, then suddenly uttered, she's coming, she's butting." And the next moment, young man grabbed his belly and cried of pain. I didn't see the deer ghost, but did see something rumbling in his stomach myself. Seeing nowhere to hide anymore, the man finally opened up. He had returned home in the countryside to prepare for some sort of national certificate test. One of his old buddies there was a small-time hunter, and one day he managed to catch a roe deer with a snare he had set. He called in his friends in the village to have a barbecue party together. Our guy in trouble was also invited. They settled down at a nice shady corner of the valley and started with drinking fresh blood from then still alive deer. Only then they realized the deer was carrying a baby, but none really cared. The mother became a barbecue and the baby a soup, and the soup was offered to our guy as he was working hard towards the big test. No wonder the ghost of the mother deer was first targeting this guy. His mother kept crying listening to the story. "A roe deer is a holy animal and killed a pregnant one and ate its fetus on top of it all," she lamented. Auntie told her to get hold of herself and told them to wait in the garden. I followed her in her room. She was preparing to write a talisman. It was unusual she wrote a talisman so impromptu. It takes a lot of spiritual energy to create talisman on the part of the shaman, and she usually reserved it till she felt ready after a period of prayers and fasting. I said, "Wow, Auntie, why?" But Auntie for once vanished even me, her adored prodige, that she should concentrate 100%. I was pissed to be kicked out and took it out on the poor guy waiting in the garden. "Why did you eat it, uncle? I saw the baby deer rumbling in your tummy." his face turned almost crying. It took a long time before Auntie came out, looking visibly exhausted. She handed them the talisman and said that the man would have to keep it on person at all times, otherwise he was good as dead. The mother bowed to Auntie a dozen times and asked if this would do then. Auntie scoffed and told her it was but a temporary solution and they'd have to throw a big ritual sometime soon. She further instructed the mother to call in all her son's friends the next day who partied over the deer barbecue, that she herself would come around to face them and assess the situation. Unfortunately, I could not join Auntie to the meeting because my mom, upset with my poor test result from school, forbade me from getting around a while. I could only learn what happened at the meeting later from Auntie's account. There were 6 of them who ate the raw deer. Fortunately, most of them seemed to be saved from severe revenge, apart from the man who ate the deer fetus and his friend who hunted the deer in the first place. Especially it was too late for the hunter guy, Auntie said. There were so many resentful souls of all the animals he had hunted and killed over the years, all waiting for their chance to revenge. Now, killing is a part of how this world runs, just as you can't blame a carnivore hunting. Animals would not be so resentful for those who have to hunt for living. But it's a different story if one hunts and kills for fun as a sport. Causing an unnecessary death is bound to create a karma. And karma did take its course in this case too. The 4 friends who were spared from severe consequences nevertheless experienced minor accidents. One got a heavy cut on his hand while cutting the grass. Another broke his arm from a fall while crossing a stream. The other his shoulder from sleeping in his bathroom, etc. The hunter guy, he died not long after. Apparently tumbled down on a hill and got his neck punctured by a sharp branch. As for the man who ate the baby deer, he was spared after Auntie's ritual to appease the soul of the raw deer. I hear he failed nevertheless the big test he'd been preparing for and subsequently gave up. Whether it was still the curse of the raw deer or not, who can tell? Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. With the growing concerns about impending environmental disasters, one can say animism is actually enjoying the resurgence. Veganism and animal rights movement are basically born out of the same vein of philosophy. I don't mean to advocate the superstitious side of animism, but considering human nature that is more emotional than rational, the philosophy of nature having its own soul may provide a quicker way to drive people to get more mindful about environmental issues. And in that sense, animism may become once again the zeitgeist of the coming age. Who knows? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you haven't yet, please give my video a thumbs up, share it on social medias, and subscribe to my channel. It all helps my channel grow and encourage me to carry on. Until the next, have a wonderful week and take care.